Look at this line. Look at this line always in front of me, running straight up my spine and perfectly balanced between give and take signs. With give on my left and take on my right, it's nature's design, so well defined. Plants, bugs, and animals straddle the line, perfectly balanced between the two sides. Whales, ants, eagles, trees, bees, lions, their wisdom and beauty still baffle science. They live on pure instinct and a will to survive, but give and take equally to create a circle of life. This remarkable system has been tested by time in the mountains, the oceans, the rivers, the valleys, the deserts, and the skies. But what about us? We live here too. Aha, an important point we need to discuss. Why? Because we are divine, blessed with our minds. We get to choose which side of the line. So why don't we try to see what we find if I shuffle my feet onto the give side of my line? A giver am I, spending some time on the give side of my line. I'm fully aware that we're all intertwined, sharing Earth's land, air, and water supply, and thankful for what we've been given. No lies, no bribes, no blurry gray lines, no reason to hide. I'm bursting with pride. I'll stand up and shine in the darkest of times and work every day towards a meaningful life. Why? Because I care. And giving is more than a physical act. It's an attitude, a favor, a positive chat. But it's true none will survive without taking sometimes. The earth provides harvest to keep us alive. So why don't we try to see what we find if I shuffle my feet onto the take side of my line? A taker am I. A taker am I. What do I need? How much and why? Well, maybe it's food, clothes, or a ride. These things I will take for good reason. But listen up closely. It's time to be wise. Don't waste what you take or litter outside, because whatever you take comes with a price. It's not only money that gets sacrificed. Open your eyes, your hearts, and your mind. I've seen too many plastic bags and bottles float by. The earth is our garden, our precious lifeline. It needs to be healthy so we can survive. So take what you need. Don't take all the time, or we'll be leaving behind a junk pile shrine. You know, the more that I think, the more I surmise, the more I see a strange twist in this rhyme. Taking too much would make me feel empty inside, not full. I mean, if I'm hurting the earth, how hollow am I? But giving would fill me up, flood my heart with purpose and pride, knowing I'm helping the circle of life. So think long and hard. Study both sides. Crossing this line should be thoughtful and kind, but at any given time, you'll have to decide which side of your line you choose to reside. A giver or a taker? A giver or a taker? You are the future, and this is the most important choice of your life. Thanks to Mark and Tyler for helping to inspire.
Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And the person you saw performing that very thought-provoking rhyme rap is Jim Scanlon. He is the author of the musical adventure of One Shot Billy. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I read the book, and I really listened to it as you did your rap. And there's a very compelling message. So how did you come to create this message? What was your driving force?
My driving force behind the message, not only the rap/rhyme in the book, is the fact I have a daughter named Holly, who I see her future in some of the things that I'm aware of being a father and an older person, is that we really need to start paying attention to things that are going on around us, of being aware of each other and certainly be aware of the planet. Not to sound too preachy, so I wanted to wrap that message up in a nice, lighthearted, entertaining vehicle that people could aspire to, which includes music,
Yes.
rhymes, raps, poems, as well as a storyline that's a framed narrative that starts out and takes place in a fifth grade classroom.
Right. So again, you have these characters. I've read the book, And I thought it had an important message. And I thought it was, I think I shared with you that I always read to my kids, even, probably into their early teens. It was kind of something we shared. And this would have been the kind of book that I would have liked to have read to them, because there is a story and an adventure, but there's a message without being preachy and banging you over the head.
Nothing makes me feel better than when a parent comes to me and said, I read this to my children, and that the children had the chance to ask questions and the parent had the ability to then explain some of the things that are going on in the book. It recently happened, that happened to me this weekend, where I sat down with a parent and his 3 children, and in fact they asked me to play some music for them as well. And we talked about the book. And I think the idea behind the characters, I wanted to personify the forces of nature. Mm-hmm. We hear that term all the time, the forces of nature. Mm-hmm. Well, what are the forces of nature? So I thought to myself, and this really came from a song I had written earlier about Mother Nature. Mm. And the role she really played, and imagined her face and her family and who she would be and her feelings. And it turned out she was a doting mom, no different than most of us. Mm-hmm. And her children, who were really important players in the force of nature, as forces of nature, she didn't really treat them or discipline them as much as she should have. And she found out, wow, it's time to really become a parent and show these children what makes the most sense, most namely the youngest one, William, who ultimately becomes One Shot Billy.
So that's great, and it's so creative. So can you say One Shot Billy? I mean, I know what that means, but why One Shot Billy?
Well, the forces of nature are made up of Mother Nature as a CEO of a company called Earth Management Systems. And her 3 sons are the forces of nature. The oldest is named Frederick. He's Father Time. Mm-hmm. There is no dad involved with this family, so he always imagined himself as the man of the family. The middle brother is named Aaron, the man in the moon. Mm-hmm. And his responsibility was for the chaotic rhythms, the department of ebb and flow, all the things that happen in the atmosphere that are somewhat chaotic. And then the youngest brother is a young man named William. He's the baby of the family, and rightly so, he's Cupid. Mm-hmm. And we find out that his job is not necessarily to just make people fall in love. His job is to go out, like quality control, like we find in most businesses, and find givers and make givers fall in love. So then they'll surround themselves with givers. If they have children, they'll teach their children to be givers, and will always continue to have this circle of life, and everybody being more aware that we need to be givers as human beings more than takers, because ultimately the earth is our asset, and we are maybe taking too much at this time.
I think the most compelling thing to me is the choice word. There is a give and take, and nature is balanced, and not just in this very superficial way, but if you look even at one individual flower, and every aspect of it is significant and meaningful and necessary, and then it is attached to getting fertilized. And so there's this whole stream of events that we typically just look at the surface and we think, oh, we lose a species, big whoop. But everything on the planet is impacted by that loss. And so I think that whole thing about balance is one of the key messages. But as humans, the flowers are just flowering, and dogs are just being dogs. But as humans, we actually have choice. And I think the whole idea of focusing on you get to choose, and yes, you're going to have to give, and yes, you're going to have to take, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you kind of overdo one over the other, then bad things happen.
Thank you for reading the book, and your assessment is correct. And you may have wondered during the wrap that I have construction cones and caution tape I use as my props. And I look at myself no different than anyone else. I'm not better. I just have to always think there's consequences to my actions. So I consider myself trying to become a better person all the time. And I'd literally, in my mind, envision a construction site. So that's why I use these construction cones and this caution tape to say, wherever I go and at any given time, I have to choose whether I'm a giver or a taker. And not to change people's minds, not to get, but awareness is so important. And again, that's the most fulfilling thing in the book, is when some of the people, the younger people, even the older people, they say, everybody needs to hear this message. It's not beating anyone over the head. It's a fun message, but at the same time, it's very important. It's really important. It's hard to live with your head in the sand saying that we don't have to wake up a little bit and just really realize what we're doing as people. There's a couple of lines in the story. William says, it's not how much you win, it's what you choose. And I really appreciate the time with you, because I haven't had a chance to talk to people on an intellectual level on some of these, what some of these things mean. But to win, our society is run win, 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 win. It's okay. We compete. Animals compete. But we have a choice. When we win, we get power. Let's choose to do the right thing with it. We too often build higher walls, separate ourselves from everyone, get our private jets, do all the things we do to separate ourselves, rather than we win, 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 win. Let's try to do something for everyone. And it's not easy, because if just a few people do it, you really get run over. If everybody just started, have a little social conscious to what their impact of their choice is, and then impart that wisdom, eventually it would take hold. And I call this book a goodwill mission, and I'm hoping to usher it and shepherd it along its way and have it come to life one day. The reason I wrote all the songs, because the character sings, was because it gave it so many options, meaning that it could be a stage act. Right now, I do motivational speaking for young audience. So I go to schools, day camps, and houses, and I'll sit down and do the rap and do the rhyme, and then tell the story, an unabridged story of the musical adventure One Shot Billy, but show his motivation. And it really boils down to two things: self-esteem and nature conservation. And I believe those are the two most compelling issues we face. Again, not to be preachy, just to be smart. Just to be smart. I've got to deal with the things I have to deal with, no different than anyone else. And I'm convinced that I could not have embarked on this mission or had the insight to try to write a story like this unless I've lived both sides of the line.
Yeah. And I think the issue of self-esteem, as a life coach, all my clients deal with that on some level. And I don't care if you're a kid or an adult or a really hugely successful, financially successful person. If there's always some issue with self-esteem. And I think the experience that people have when they consciously give really contributes to the self-esteem. And so, this whole idea of winning and getting more, it kind of alienates us from one another. So I think we have to redefine winning because, and again, what I'm so happy about what you're doing by going and performing in front of children is that right now, mostly people are disconnecting, and we could go on the rant about technology and whatever. But I think children long for stories. They long for heroes. And it's very easy to get them engaged. But if nobody's doing it, the only thing they're engaged in is what everybody else is engaged in, is a little tool that they stare at, and that starts to overtake it. So I think it's developing consciousness.
You are hitting everything that I tried to present in the book. In fact, self-esteem to me is an interesting one. When I wrote the book and I wrote the songs, I had this vision in my mind. I didn't try to get a publishing deal. I just said it's an organic story. I wanted to travel the world just because people would read it and hand it off. And I tried to do everything from behind my keyboard. And it was a little arrogant. It was a little short-sighted, but it was really driven by low self-esteem, meaning that I could not imagine myself in this scenario right here. I could never imagine myself in front of people playing guitar because, quite frankly, I was told a lot of times, you're not a great singer, you're not a great guitar player. Since I've been trying, I never played out. So now I have to give kudos to a group called Toastmasters International, And kudos to my brother Harry, who ushered me to open mic night 4 times. It said, go up there and do it. You can do this. This is too important. But for me to stand in front of people and be passionate about this is the easy part, but it's really getting there. And I build that into my presentation. I tell the kids, I said, listen, before I came out here, I was afraid because I was told all these bad voices telling me I'm not good. And there's always usually a young lady. Yesterday was a young man. They always say, no, you're really good. and it's like, it's how you decide to see yourself is so important. How you choose.
How you choose to see yourself. Yes. And I think that's where we kind of are lacking is we don't really emphasize the whole thing of choice and and how you think is a choice. Because typically, you know, our thoughts are just there. So we don't question them. They just surface. We believe them. We think they must be true because they're a thought and they're in our head, as opposed to examining it.
Well, see, I would argue the other way, that fear keeps good thoughts from coming up, meaning that, you know, I look at fear as a very important thing because it creates thoughtfulness. But fear beyond thoughtfulness is no good because then it's crippling. And so when I look at politicians, you know, and I see somebody who commands the stage and can just stand up in front of, I'm hoping there's fear inside them the same way there is with me, because even in this interview, I want to try to be thoughtful. I want to try to be sincere. I want to try to be correct in my assumptions. But trust me when I say nothing is coming out of my mouth out of arrogance or being careless. There's always a bubbling fear in me trying to do the right thing. I always try to do the right thing, and that's a good thing.
Yes. And again, nervousness, a little fear, it gives you your edge or keeps you conscious or aware.
It keeps a race car driver from flying off the track. But
yes.
The guy that pushes that line so far wins the race.
You know, I want to go back to this winning thing because the competition is part of nature.
It's a beautiful thing.
And but again, we get, I think, lost in the end game. And the whole thing is, again, with self-esteem, I think when you talk about being a better person, the one thing that I think is important for people to realize is that they don't need to be fixed. I don't need to be a better person because I need to be fixed. No. Because that's where you go into low self-esteem. So it's just, I need to be a better person because like a beautiful blossoming flower, I need to evolve to my peak potential.
Can I say it a better way maybe?
Yes.
I try to be a better me.
Yes.
I'll always own me, and I know I come with good things and bad things, but I always want to try to be a better me. And listen, there's things I say, sometimes I cringe, and I will go back and apologize. There's things I do, and I want to take, at least a better look at how I dealt with that situation. It happens all the time. If you're a dad,
yes,
you're trying to raise a daughter, you make mistakes, but you need to communicate those mistakes.
Yes, but again, mistakes do not mean, again, I have so many people, I work with so many people who think that making a mistake makes them defective.
Well, therein lies the issue with why I was so fearful about performing in front of people, because mistakes, being judged, it's not easy. And you try to put your best foot forward, but you know what, that's when you abandon who you are, because we're all going to make mistakes. And the character in the book certainly makes us share mistakes. I hope that you got at his root, he's a good person. And, he tries to find love and try to find acceptance in all the wrong places. And when he really finds the end, and this is not a new story, it's just a different way to tell the same story.
Right.
When he finally accepts himself for who he is, and he finds that through giving, right? The cure-all. My wife, when I decided to write the book, she said, oh, you should be a psychologist or whatever. I said, I would just get a pickup truck and a sofa. That's all I need. And she's like, why? I said, well, when I saw somebody that was having problems that was pretty much well off, I'd put them on my sofa, drive to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and we'd sit in the lobby and say, how do you feel now? Because if you really use perspective, which the character does, he finally gains perspective. Instead of just worried about himself, oh, what am I going through? He figures out through helping that now he learns to love himself. And that's really the key.
It's really good. So I'm going to ask you to sing again, but before we do that, explain Aim on You.
Aim on You is the tagline that the character William, who is Cupid, his job as a human resources director is to shoot. And it's just a catchphrase for him saying, if you're a giver, it's time to shoot you with a love arrow, meaning aim on you. And that's his catchphrase. And it really comes from Good on You from Australia. I just thought Aim on You was just a nice way to say it. I had it as a title of the story for a little while, and then some things happened in our society that I didn't know whether that was the right thing to put out there, namely Sandy Hook. So I backed off of that. But it's really, I have people now who know what I do, and if they see me on the street, they go, Aim on You. And it's almost like right on. It's almost like I'm a giver, you're a giver, and we're givers, and we're going to try to do the right thing. So that was the impetus behind it, because I wanted the character to have a catchphrase. I baked in all these things, and we could talk about it for 3 hours, all these little things for this book, story, songs to catch fire. In fact, in the song I'm going to sing, it's the part of the story where William invents this character One Shot Billy, who he believes is a superhero. When he thinks about it, he's got love arrows, and love arrows are the greatest power of all. Love conquers all. Aviam vincit amor is a Latin phrase for that. And he knows he can fly at hyperspeed, so why not? He could be a superhero too. But he says something in the song that I've never disclosed to anybody that shows why at this point maybe he wasn't ready to save the day.
Okay, so you're ready to do that song for us?
If that's what we need to do.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you. I'm on a mission. I gotta save mankind. I won't be missing. I know it's all on the line. Here comes precision, just like a surgical knife. Yeah. Don't worry, mother. Just leave it all up to me. Tell my brothers I'm aiming to please. Soon you'll discover there's no one better than me. No, I'm gonna find two givers, one shot at a time. I know it all comes down to me. I'm One Shot Billy, B-I-L-L-Y. Nice, Natasha. We make a good team. I'm feeling faster than ever before. I got it mastered, and I'm ready to score. No more disasters. I'm here for the cure, yeah. I'm gonna find two givers, one shot at a time. I'm gonna finally be a winner, one shot at a time. I know it all comes down to me. I'm One Shot Billy,
B-I-L-L-Y.
Natasha. Here we go. Almost over. I'm gonna find two givers, one shot at a time. I'm gonna finally be a winner, one shot at a time. I know it all comes down to me. I'll help you this time. I'm One Shot Billy,
B-I-L-L-Y.
I'm One Shot Billy, B-I-L-L. I'm One Shot Billy, B-I-L-L-Y. You were great. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us, and I invite you to get in touch with Jim. He goes into schools. He has a message, and I want to thank you, Jim.
Oh, there's no place I'd rather be than right here with you, Natasha. Since the moment I met you, you really were a thoughtful person, and I know you're already ahead of me in trying to make a difference with people, but I think it's fantastic what you do, so thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us.